We did say that you could probably use just about any program or even hardware to get audio into a digital format. So if you've got a smartphone, and I know you all do, there's undoubtedly some kind of voice memo thing on there. The microphones on there are spectacular. I was going to pause and make a joke about that. I'll continue. Now it's in my head. But on your hardware, on your laptop, it might be as simple as finding some kind of utility. I'm guessing that on the Windows side there might be some primitive, hey, I'm recording a thing utility. There's plenty of free programs out there that do it. But I'll talk about QuickTime Player. I'll talk about Adobe Audition, which is designed specifically for multi-track audio recording. And then really Premiere, I think you can do everything in Premiere except Draw. I think your entire pipeline could certainly be in there and would be the most effective place to do it. In part because you'll be able to time picture, you'll be able to move audio, you'll be able to work with multiple channels of audio, you'll be able to filter audio to make it better, add some movement to the camera stuff. So it's really a one-stop shop, but I'll show you some of these other ones more as like a utility that you might be interested in. With just even the most basic QuickTime Player, you'll notice that new audio recording is an option. And right now, there I am, I'm live. If you want to hook up a specific kind of hardware to your device, by clicking on this little triangle drop down here, you'll see what inputs you currently have. So I could be coming off of my hardware that's going out to the projector right now, or I could come off my microphone, which makes the more sense here. And then you have the ability to control your audio quality. High here is probably an M4A file. It's compressed, but no one will care, no one will notice. And maximum is probably an AIF file on the Mac or a WAV file on the Windows side. So I hit record, I'm recording. As soon as I'm done, I hit stop. I hit record, I'm recording. As soon as I'm done, yeah, so there it is. Simple as that. And like I said, this even just the built-in stuff on your laptop might be really good for doing your voice stuff. I like a voice that sounds close and has some beef to it, but realistically, if you want it to sound like they're in a room, you know, if you're several inches away from the microphone, you know, 18 plus, it'll sound more like life. A little bit more of that space between us and them, as opposed to someone whispering in your ear, which is a different thing. Now, if you do have a voiceover that's meant to be mental, like somebody's thoughts or narration, you'll definitely want to get close because that gives it a different impression, and that's a good thing. Think of how contrast works for audio. You know, close versus far. Loud versus soft, those sorts of things. The same kind of desire for contrast there that we have in picture. And you really, with the tools that we have a lot of options. You know, small ambient sounds, trickling streams in the background, music that's subtle, music that's in your face. So use all of those. That's a big part of your storytelling toolkit. Audition looks really intimidating, and if you were to learn everything in it, it kind of is. But for you, it might be exclusively an editing suite / recording suite for what you're going to do. You can make a new multi-track document, multi-track session here, and it gives you really an infinite number of tracks that you can continue to add to. The only thing that you need to do to make sure that you're ready to go is to set up your preferences, which are going to be under the Audition there, and you'll see audio hardware as an option. So it will default to whatever is probably your system default for audio. So if it's a microphone that's built in, that's going to be visible naturally. Likewise, built-in speakers. You might see a headphone jack if you've got headphones plugged in. You might see a USB mic if you've got a mic plugged in. But mine is currently set to be just fine, so I can say OK. And to activate recording for something, I just hit the little R button right there. We've got mute, solo, and record. And our general, like, let's start recording this button is down here. And this is the sound of Michael recording his sound. And once that's played back, we get what's called a waveform here. And it's just what you think. As you are louder, it's taller. And silences are the gaps between. This button is down. Hit record again. Sure, I'll tell you what, I'll start a conversation with myself. So I'll activate my next channel to record, and I'll turn that record off. And I will respond to what he's saying in due time. So I've hit R for record, and this little record button down here is down here. And this is the sound of Michael recording his sound. Oh, he's very good. Okay, so you can see that I peaked there. This is a great time to show that. If you see it flattened out at the top, like it's hit the ceiling, it has. And generally, that's going to be bad, but let's take a listen. Oh, he's very good. Actually, it's not too bad. With digital, you have a lot of headroom, and it takes a lot to get clipping to happen. You really need to be like, hey, the mic and screaming. So that is, which one is actually the better recording? I would say this is a little bit better. If we could have not hit that top peak, that would have been even better. But this is a little flimsy. I would say this is fine, it's passable, and you can also turn up the levels of things here too. So here I've got levels coming up on that one. And right now it's playing through my MacBook speakers. So you might have that same situation. Oh, gee, I really wanted to come through my headphones, but it's coming out of my speakers. So let me get it to come out of the speakers for you there. That would be me changing my output, not to speakers, but to DisplayPort. And now this might be really loud, so I gotta be careful. Oh, it's very loud. This button down here is down here. And this is the sound of Michael recording his sound. Oh, he's very good. Person, right? Down here is down here. And this is the sound of Michael recording. Now notice when I recorded myself, the speaker was recording my original recording. So that's why you might want to be under phones for subsequent takes. That's why you might want to hit mute on old takes when you're doing stuff like that, because you'll start to stack up noises upon noises. But for me, it might be just as simple as, hey, I can trim that down, and now all of that stuff is gone. And when the lovely lady comes in to talk, then she's got her own track, and she's not in the way. She could also interrupt. I can talk on top of myself. I can be twice the man I was a moment ago. Okay, so there's a lot of tools in here, not the least of which is you can fix all the things that you did. Really quickly, improving audio compressing can get it to be beefier. So like if you had a recording that was a little wimpy to begin with, start experimenting with some of the basic compressors in here, and it will raise up the lower stuff. It'll bring down anything peaky and kind of fit it into a standard spot. When you hear radio announcers talking, they're highly compressed, so it's always perfectly at the same level. Of course, that's years of them performing too. So that's under effects, and you can add that to a channel. There's effects in here like echoes, so maybe that's something that you want to, if you have things taking place in a cave, you could add that to tracks. EQ is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more in Premiere because it's a little easier. And we can go in with almost no knowledge and just use their presets, and they turn out really nice. Premiere has added basically all the things that you need for general production. So, you want to make it sound like it's closer? Here's a button for that. You want to just, it's a female and you want to make an EQ that's idealized for a female vocal, bam, there it is. So those sorts of things are built in, and it's super useful. Maybe you want to pitch shift your character. Let's see if we can add that to my lady here. Oh, he's very good. So she's pretty good, but doesn't sound quite female. Sound. Oh, he's very good. Crank her up a little bit more. Sound. Oh, he's very good. All right, so that's pitch shifting. If you're the only person doing your voices and you want to make it sound like more people, pitch shifting is a good place to go because suddenly they're very different. If we add that to our original guy, it's going to be probably a different story, but why not? Let's do it. Pitch is automatically fun. Automatically funny, too.
This button is down here. And this is the...
Or maybe he's...
This button is down here. And this is the sound of Michael recording his sound.
So they're fun. When you are done doing your thing, and this could be, you could be dragging in sound effects into these channels. You can also import them here and drag them in as you would with an editorial program. When you're done, you're just going to export a mix. So that'll be multi-track mix down, entire session, generally. So if you've got things that are off, they won't record. If you want to change the levels of things, like she was awfully loud, we can bring her down a bit. You can do kind of that mixing sort of thing right in here. There's also more of a proper mixer here. If you're into sliders, you can see that it's got the illusion of a full sort of workstation there. But then to export, it's export, multi-track mix down, entire session. And you can choose to use everything from an AIF for Mac or WAV for Windows to MP3. And MP3 might be a smart move in Premiere, not so much, but definitely in Photoshop, where you don't want to be taxing the machine any more than it's already taxed. If you think about what Photoshop has to do when it's playing back your video, it's trying to load layers, maybe motion, so it's trying to do all of that on the fly. If you can make your audio file less demanding, then that's fine. And no one will hear a difference between an uncompressed file and a compressed file by the time we're done with it. You know, it's going to go through, it's going to rather go through the ringer. In an ideal world, you'd stay uncompressed all the way to the end, but animatics are kind of a different story. I captured some animatics from the new Spider-Verse movie. Apparently on the Blu-ray, they have a version that is extended with all the stuff that they cut, and it's cut into the movie, and it's like about a half hour longer. They're not very good, but the animatics are interesting to look at. So you can hear the quality difference. I mean, sometimes it's not even the actors, you know, it's just temp tracks. It's interesting to see. So Premiere is Adobe's video editing program. So it works fine for what we're going to do. To begin, you'll see a display like this that says, hey, you haven't made anything yet, so let's start with a new project. This is where I wanted Audition to tell me where the media is saved. You can see here I've got users, Hegel, documents. So it's going into my Osril Animatic, which is fine because this is going to be a demo for that. So I'll say yes to that. But if you wanted to change its location, say put it on a different drive, you can do that under Browse. At the moment, it's fine to leave everything else here the same, because really all of the things that we're going to set up in terms of project size and the image size and so on are part of the project rather than the preset. So this looks intimidating and it's a little washed out, but we've got essentially a media window where we'll bring stuff in, a timeline, and a viewer. Those are the big ones. And depending on what format we're sitting in, like if we're sitting in the editing layout, it might look a little different. There's a specifically audio layout that you might choose to use at one point because it brings up the parameters for those audio tools that we talked about. But we'll start with editing here. And let's say we're right from scratch and we want to start recording audio, which is where I think most of you are at. I think it's a good idea to create a new sequence. And this is where you need a little foreknowledge about where we're headed. So what will say new sequence, and it's going to give us like 1,000 different options over here. And it gets pretty unwieldy for somebody who might not know what to do. The important thing to know is that we want to end up with 1920 by 1080, 24p, and square pixel. It just so happens that digital SLRs work in that. So if you want to just go to the digital SLR and the 24p setup, you'll notice that 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, that says 23976 there. That's sort of a long way to say the same thing. And then square pixel and progressive, all things that we like, so we can say okay to that. This is now a sequence that we can name. This could be Animatic 1 or Scene 1 or whatever it happens to be. And you'll notice that in each of these, we've got a set of video tracks up here that are labeled V for video. And not a lot of audio tracks, but 3 to start with that are labeled A1 and A2 and A3. If we want to add more, it's as simple as a right click here to add tracks. And we can say, hey, no video, we're fine with video, give me 2 more audio tracks, and there they go. When you see a little highlight here, that means that that track is activated. And that's important when you're dragging clips in, but not so much when we're originating them. Hey, look, a recording button. It looks like a little microphone. It says voiceover record. So in here, they call it voiceover because it's assumed that we're video editing, we've brought in picture, and we just want to do something on top of that. We're kind of doing a weird workaround that this is not probably normally designed for. But again, in Premiere, we're going to want to make sure that our preferences for audio hardware are set right. So microphone and speakers is fine for us. Now I'll tell you what, let's go output to display port for me so that you guys can hear it out there. And let's do one other thing, which is under media. So this is the button that I was looking for on the other program. Media tells us, no, media cache, yeah. Tells us where we're going to be saving those things. So right now mine is set to something on my desktop, edit to. That's fine, I know where that is. So actually what's fun about this program is if you've deleted that folder and you open up this program and it doesn't see it, it makes it again. So danger, you might end up with a lot of extras. So you want to always make sure that you're going to the right file. Likewise, Premiere doesn't necessarily retain the connection between that media if you move it. So if you move it onto another drive, it says, I don't know where that stuff is. You have to go track it down. So if you know where it is, you go follow through to the finder to where it is. Click on the first of those options, the first piece of media that, hey, I know that this one goes with this scene, and it will connect all the rest of them. So it'll look like a disaster, but it's a one-click fix, and you're back and running. So I'll say okay to that. So when I start recording here, it gives me a little countdown. When I start recording here, I don't see it moving forward, but maybe it is. Maybe I'm zoomed. Yes, I'm zoomed out too far. I can see my peaks here. Let's talk about peaks really quick. If I'm up here, you'll see that it goes red. A great place to be, and I happen to be there, is about -12. -12 is a good peak area for digital recording. You can go up a lot higher before we start to see any issues, but anything much lower than that, it's just not going to be as good. I think when I'm done, I can probably just hit the regular stop here. And there's my media, kind of tiny. If you don't like that, you can scale up the size of these by clicking and dragging, so you can see the waveform a little better. You can also zoom in. That's just the plus and minus keys, or you can use this slider to zoom in on it. So there's my level. Okay, maybe it is. Maybe I'm zoomed. Yes, I'm zoomed out too far. I can see my peaks here, and even the quiet stuff. And that. And it's just not going to be as good. You know, if you're recording somebody whispering, they don't need to do a stage whisper. You just need to make sure that their levels are okay. You know, it doesn't have to be fake whispering like you might have to in theater. Just let it be properly recorded. Let me try and record something not as well. I think when I'm done, I can probably just hit the regular. So maybe I'm sort of off mic here. I'm not doing as good a job. My levels are still pretty good. Okay, so. Unfortunately, the actor had moved away from the microphone. What an idiot. Let's see if we can fix that. Stop. Okay. That's still pretty good. So I'm always shocked with the quality of this mic here. But so maybe I'm sort of off mic here. I'm not doing as good a job. Let's get a little better listen job. My levels that's still pretty good. Okay, so unfortunately, the actor had moved away from the microphone. So it's we're getting a little room noise in there, but it's pretty legible. Let's talk about some filtering in here. Oh, you know, I'll tell you what. I'll do that, and then I'll show you on some clips that, even though they were close mic'd, have some issues. So under our sound panel, and if you don't find it, you can always go over to the audio preset here, and then that essential sound panel will pop up. When you click on one of your files in here, you'll see that some presets become available. We've got dialogue, music, sound effects, and ambience. And they're basically little EQ dial-ups. Like, for example, if I want him to sound like he's coming across the telephone, We've got it on the telephone.
So maybe I'm sort of off mic here.
Did you notice how that got pretty loud? I'm going to back it off a little in the room, but check out the peaks.
I'm not doing as good a job.
It's going all the way up to the red here. Nice, because it's emphasizing the stuff I need to hear. You can see there's an EQ that is right in. This is replicating what a phone does, which is used to be that telephones, because of the hardware, would focus only on the center part of a voice. So you'd lose the high end and you'd lose the low end. And it's kind of replicating that here. But it's also coming out too loud. So we also have in here tools to just kind of dial that back. So if I have it peaking in a way I don't want to, I can turn on clip volume at the bottom and just...
My levels are, that's still pretty good. Okay, so...
and if it's meant to be the guy's holding the mic, the headset, and he's talking to somebody else in the room while the guy's still talking, he can...
unfortunately, the actor had moved away.
Yeah, this is going to be a long call if you guys want to come back. So we have a lot of leeway, just even from the presets. But let's say we want to make that sound like we didn't screw it up. So in that case, we'll say it could be balanced male voice. And it's a slightly different preset there.
Here, I'm not doing as good a job. My levels are...
Some of that bass came
That's
back.
still pretty good. Okay, so unfortunately, the actor had moved away from the microphone.
It's still a little reflective, and that's always going to be the case. If it's picking up more room than person, you're going to get room sound instead of person sound. But that's not a bad improvement. Let's try something called Make Close Up.
I'm not doing as good a job. My levels are, that's still pretty good. Okay, so unfortunately, the actor had moved away from the microphone. Watching the...
You can hear a little bit of kind of rumble coming in because it's trying to raise up the stuff that would be the things that you'd hear if I were closer to you, that bassiness of the chest resonating or whatever it happens to be. So those are fun and pretty easy to use and plenty fun to experiment with too. Now, if you wanted to dial up your own, or if you found there was something about that you didn't like, if you double click on a clip, you've got all of those items here as effects that you can turn off or edit individually or add to. There's a lot of other effects, and you can find those. There's a window for it. Effects is open. Where is he? There he is. Audio effects. And here is essentially the same thing that we saw in Audition as a drop-down with a few others thrown in for good measure. Reverbs, pitch shifting, EQs, dehummers, de-essers, a lot of things that can improve it if you know what those things do. And obviously the documentation for this is a click away if you want to dig in. But the big fixes are, I think, for you guys are going to be over here. Legibility, just improving the general timbre and timbre of the sound can be done with that essential sound palette. And it's so easy to click, click, click. If you've done one clip to your actor and there's 10 other clips and you want to copy it over to that person, let's say I want to copy this setting to my other clip here, I'll right click on the file itself and say copy, which would suggest that I'm copying that piece. But as I click over on the other guy and say paste attributes, I get the option to paste on, could be levels, could be effects. Right now it's currently, there's the effects. So if I raise the volume on a clip and wanted to apply that to 12 clips, select them, paste attributes, volume, or channel volume. If I wanted to copy all of the dialogue presets that I just made, I can say OK. And so now that one has the same beef. Is about -12. -12 is, so now he's there too. And we can tell that by double clicking on it, going over to that effects tab, excuse me. And there they all are: enhancer, graphic EQ, dynamics processing, and so on. Questions so far? Yeah.
When you recorded that, it was kind of echoey. Is any of that going to show up in the actual recording?
For sure. Yeah, so if you want it to sound like it's leaving the room, have them leave the mic. If you mean for it to not sound that way, keep them by the mic. That's the best way to fix that. You can get noise out of a clip, and I'll show you me trying to do that. Let's see, that's going to be under repair. So let's listen to the offending part here.
Microphone, watching.
Right. So we've got reduce rumble. Let's see what happens here.
What an idiot. Let's see how if we can fix that. What an idiot. Let's see how if we can fix that.
You can kind of hear it going there. Reduce noise can start to sound like they're trapped in a refrigerator. It sucks the air out of the room and it sounds really weird. I'll give you an example.
Unfortunately, the actor had moved away from the microphone. What an idiot. Let's see how if we can fix that.
Let's turn up our reduce rumble rather than turning it
The
down.
microphone. What an idiot.
Let's crank our reduce noise to a crazy level here. I'm going to put a little chop in here so it doesn't have to process the all the time.
What an idiot. Let's see how if we can fix that.
That's not bad. You know, it took a lot of the roar out of there. Let's see what dehum adds to the mix.
What an idiot. Let's see how if we can.
Very antiseptic now, right? But also thin. Whatever it gained in the EQ to get my sound back has been sucked out of it too. So it's like I'm brightening the darks. I'm darkening the brights. So it becomes kind of gray. So you do want to record it as accurately as you can the first time out. Okay. Let me show you some editing things. And for this, I'll just open up a project that I've already started. These are things that I recorded with my slightly better microphone set. And here's an edit already done, which I can play by hitting this.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I've been hanging around here for hours.
I seem to have one of my tracks is muted. Or it's not it's not muted, it's just not playing back. So I find that this is happening a lot with the current version of Premiere. People go, hey, I can see my sound, but I can't hear it. So the only way I've figured out to do it is to either solo or mute it.
This person who was extreme
And then once you come back,
for
it'll-
hours. Anyway, this person who was extremely boring and uninteresting worked in this dull, drab office. It's impossible to say how appallingly dull and boring it all was. Look, just leave it to me, will you?
So on the bottom, we've got music. Next one up here is the office ambient. This is the main character's track, and this is the narrator's track. And on each of these, I've done some light editing to make them. You can see my initial recordings are kind of all over the place. When you're your own actor and engineer, you're not always paying attention to the important things like, oh yeah, I actually have to record that well, not just say it right. So I've got lots of different levels across the board here. So if you were starting from scratch, you might make a new sequence. So let's do that. And I'll use my presets. We'll say okay to that. And then your raw audio, you might have recorded outside and imported it, or you might have recorded it in here. If you're doing your recording directly in here by hitting the voiceover button, you're probably doing it in order, and you're probably switching characters. Maybe you have one person who plays one role, and you just have them read all of their stuff, and there's just gaps where the other person should be. That's what I obviously had to do, as I was doing both characters. So it became then necessary for me to edit in order to make it sound natural. So in this one, I'm trying to replicate. There's a script that was written by Graham Chapman, who was one of the Python guys. And they were making a film that was going to be for Ringo Starr. This is in about 68 or 9 or something like that. And so I've taken the script and I've read the parts. You can see here the two that I've thumbnailed, which is what I'll show you next how to deal with here. So here's my first clip of the narrator. Anyway, this person was extremely boring. So the first thing I would do would be to find my favorite take of that.
And now I would like to try one more time, trying to get a little more proximity. Anyway, this person who was extremely boring and uninteresting worked in this dull, drab office. It's impossible to say how appallingly dull and boring it all was.
Okay, so there's my first take. I can set an in point here, which I can do either by dragging some of the items down here, or I can just hit I for in. It's the easiest shortcut you'll ever encounter. I for in, and then find the end of it and say O for out. So now I've selected, you can see it's highlighted the area of interest, and there's a little button down here that shows an audio icon. In order to drag that into the timeline, I can do either pull it right from there and stick it right where I want to. So if there's a specific channel I'm looking to drag it to, I can do that. Or I can drag it over to here, at which we'll see insert and overlay as a couple of, and overwrite as a couple of options here. Because there's nothing currently in the timeline, they're all pretty equal. So just hit insert. You'll notice it went to the track where I have this currently highlighted. And let's zoom in on that and see. There's a point where the narrator does a sniff. So maybe we want to take that out.
Worked in this dull, drab office.
While it's certainly in character with a stuffy or stuffed up narrator, maybe we want to take it out.
Office.
So there's office snort. So right in here, I'm going to get in as close as I can. That's him. I can use the razor blade tool to chop it, and then the arrow tool to pick them up and move them around. So the razor is C for cut. That's how I remember it. Pop right there, and it's going to be somewhere around here. You always want to leave air where there should be air. Like he took a breath. Obviously, he took it through his nose and it made noise. So we don't want that, but we do want the amount of space, because otherwise it's as if he never took a breath and his voice just kept going on and on and on, and somehow he managed to talk 2 sentences worth without taking a breath. So it's got to sound somewhat natural. I'm going to go right to the end of it and cut it there. So I switch over to the arrow tool. Just like in all the Adobe programs, V is the shortcut for that, and I can select it, delete it out of there. Now he will
It's
not sniff.
office. It's impossible to.
Now it sounds like too big a pause, right? So at that point, I can, with that same tool, V, pick it up, slide it a little closer together, and get.
Office. It's impossible to.
That's too short. There's no way he could have taken a breath that fast.
Office. It's impossible to say how.
Right. So now it's a clean breath. It doesn't sound narratory enough for me, so I will go ahead and I'll start processing that right away. I believe what I did for that was preset and dialogue and balance mail. Let's see if that's something.
This person who was extremely boring and uninteresting worked in this dull, drab office.
So it's pretty beefy.
It's impossible to say
compared
how.
to what we had. So I'm going to say that's just fine as is. So I'll copy and I'll paste the attributes over. Paste the attributes. That's again a right click. And say OK.
Appallingly dull and boring it all was.
Line number 1. Let's head on over, see what we got next. Ringo says, look, well, just leave it to me, will you? So I struggled really hard I brought up like interviews of Ringo from the period and went, okay, I wanted to kind of get, not quite the cartoon version of him, but almost.
Look, well, I'm glad to hear that I'm glad to hear that.
See, I did like 2 or 3 of
Look,
each.
just leave it to me, will you?
All right, I like that one. What's nice about seeing the waveform is you can very quickly know that's a line, that's a line, that's a line. So it becomes real easy to just come in here and say, look,
Just leave it to me, will you?
and I think that was about as good as it got. I like to checkerboard the audio, so a character gets his own track. It's nice to keep track of that. So your main character is always in that spot. The B character is always in that spot. Sound effects, ambient music, whatever makes sense to organize it for you. But find a method and kind of stick to it. You'll thank yourself later. And if you don't, you'll say something else to yourself later.
It all was.
Look, just leave it to me, will you?
So the nice thing about editing is that we can work that timing to within an inch of its life. If we want him to kind of more interrupt the narrator,
It all was.
we can slide this in and not exactly overlap it, but just bump it in a bit. If you want to nudge it, select it, and with the, I think it's the Option key held down? Nope, Command key, Control on Windows, arrows, left and right arrows. So you can get then a real fine.
It all was.
Look, just leave it to me, will you?
So
Anyway.
it's a little speedy, but you'll also notice that it will rewind to the beginning every time, whether you want it or not. What's the next line? What? What is the next line? No, I want to know what the next line is. No, what is the next line? So I'll go to narrator. Probably, I generally notice that I will use the last take of anything. So if I have brought in 3 or 4, I'll just always go to 4. And
What?
generally those are okay.
What?
He does a little
What?
starting before he starts there. That might be fun to keep. Oh, what?
Me, will you?
What?
Too close, right? We're losing the joke a little bit. So I'm going to select it with the V arrow. Just bump it a bit. Give him time to react.
To me, will you?
What? Anyway,
So you can see how I start to build up the performance that way, right? And then levels, right? Trying to make sure that they're appropriately loud.
what?
Look, just leave it to me, will
Ringo sounds a little bit farther away than the narrator. I might want to keep that, so it sounds like he's in the room and the narrator's in sort of a God spot. But my third clip of the narrator still needs my pasted effects on there, so I'll paste attributes. That's why it might be best to do the effects when you're all done. But I kind of go back and forth. I don't like listening to it lousy. I like to make it as good as I can in the first pass. And you might find then that you don't.
What?
Look, just leave it to me, will you?
What?
Might not have to go back as much. Push off. All right, so let's find push off from Ringo. I want to say that was better on the second take.
Look, just leave it to me, will you? Off. Push off.
No, I think that's the only push off. Must be in 3. Now that's how I can get him. This looks like a push off.
Push off.
Right? You can see it. I see the word push. I see the word off. It's kind of like looking at the Matrix and seeing the woman in red, but there it is. You'll get good at it once you do it a little bit. Count the bumps. Oh, push off. That's a 2 bump. Yeah.
What?
Push off.
What?
Push off.
Yeah, it's better the other way. So I think this is the thing that you'll spend the most time on, is getting the nuances of the pauses right. You know, the amount of space between the lines is kind of essential. When you see somebody act correctly, the pauses and what they do with them are really valuable.